On the execution scaffold inside of the Tower of London, Anne Boleyn, the second wife of King Henry VIII, had her head taken clean off by a French swordsman. She had been found guilty of 3 charges: adultery, treason, and incest, and there were a number of men who were also condemned on Tower Hill for allegedly having liaisons with the Queen. But Anne Boleyn's reputation would be shattered following the accusations levelled against her by Thomas Cromwell. Henry VIII would dispatch his wife in the most brutal way, with her losing her head. But Anne was a woman who had transcended the royal court and had caused the most important man in the country to fall in love with her. Henry VIII, when he met her, was already married, and he would do whatever he could to make Anne Boleyn his wife. He would also force huge religious change caused by the fact he was not able to get a divorce. But following Anne's death, the king tried to erase her from history, and he would paint over her paintings, and he would remove her symbols and insignia from inside of Hampton Court Palace. There was a concerted effort to get rid of Anne from history, but following her execution, there were many rumours that emerged about Anne Boleyn, and one of them included what happened to her heart following her death and execution. It was stated that her heart was cut from her body. But what was the story of the severed heart of Anne Boleyn? On the 19th of May 1536, Anne Boleyn was held inside of the Tower of London and was awaiting her execution. She was accused and was found guilty of adultery, incest and treason, and she would be executed by a French swordsman who was summoned from Calais to perform the job. Henry VIII did not want the common axe taking off the head of his queen, so he fetched a more reliable swordsman, but Anne Boleyn was then told it was time for her execution, and it would be a day etched in history, as the Queen of England was executed at the behest of her husband. A scaffold had been made on the north side of the White Tower, which was the oldest part of the Tower of London. Anne wore a red petticoat, and 2 female attendants remained with her on her final walk from the Queen's House, or the Coldharbour Tower, to the scaffold. She was rather positive, and she would lose her head within the hour. Anne was helped up the stairs, and she then on the scaffold spoke to the crowd, and she made a long speech, and in front of 200 witnesses said, "Good Christian people, I am come hither to die, for according to the law and by the law I am judged to die, and therefore I will speak nothing against it. I am come hither to accuse no man, nor to speak anything of that whereof I am accused and condemned to die. But I pray God save the king, and send him long to reign over you, for a gentler nor a more merciful prince was there never, and to me he was ever a good, a gentle, and a sovereign lord. And if any person will meddle of my cause, I require them to judge the best, and thus I take my leave of the world, and of you all, and I heartily desire you all to pray for me. O Lord, have mercy on me. To God I commend my soul." But Anne made her final preparations for her execution. She took off her headdress, and then tucked her hair under her coif, and she then said goodbye to her ladies who had remained with her. These women had been sent to the Tower with her, and they worked as spies for Cromwell to find out any information regarding Anne Boleyn that could have been used against her. But then, after saying a last prayer, Anne's executioner swung the sword and took her head clean off, as she knelt on the scaffold with the blindfold over her eyes. Anne Boleyn's head came off with one swing of the sword, and the executioner then hurriedly moved off the scaffold, and he did not hold Anne Boleyn's head up, which was customary for the execution of a traitor. Following this, after taking Anne's gown, the executioner was not spotted again, but Anne's ladies then gathered the remains up of the former queen and placed them inside of an old oak chest which held bow staves. Many of those across England were divided by Anne Boleyn, but many believed that she should not have lost her head, and the thought of a queen being executed was a harrowing one, and people across the world learned of Anne's fate. But as mentioned, there were many different rumours that emerged about Anne Boleyn, and this included things such as the Queen having 6 fingers on one hand, and other strange stories came out about her. But one of the most shocking rumours emerged about the heart of Anne Boleyn, and what happened to this after her head was taken off. At the time it was customary and common during the Tudor period for the hearts of queens and kings to be removed during the embalming process, and this was so that they could be buried somewhere important to them. This would be used upon Henry VIII's third wife, Jane Seymour, who had her heart buried inside of the chapel of Hampton Court, a few rooms away from where she gave birth to her son, Edward VI, and where she died. But there were many other prominent people who had their hearts removed after death, and this even happened centuries on, as Thomas Hardy, the writer, would have his heart removed and then buried elsewhere from the rest of his body. But the stories about Anne Boleyn's heart came out a few years after, and there was a rumour that her heart was cut out and was buried elsewhere from the rest of her body. Others claimed that she was buried in different places to the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula, where Anne was taken into after her execution. But there were stories that Anne's heart was buried elsewhere, and it's believed by some that her heart was taken somewhere important to her. Anne Boleyn and her family had links in Suffolk and in Norfolk, many miles from London, and also she had links to Hever Castle, where she grew up as a child. But stories circled around her heart, and it was claimed that Anne Boleyn's heart was cut and taken from her body, and then this was then taken from the Tower of London, and was then buried inside of St. Mary's Church in Awarton in Suffolk. The rumours regarding this specific church is because Anne had spent a lot of time here during her childhood, and that as a young girl she spent a lot of time there playing and relaxing in the lands around the church. Her uncle, Philip Colthorpe, had owned this church and also the original Tudor mansion which was there, and it was believed that Anne Boleyn was the happiest that she was at this Tudor house and mansion of her uncle. It was said that she loved visiting her aunt and uncles, and that this is the place where she may have stated that her heart was to stay. However, following Anne's execution, many believed, especially in this region, that Anne's heart was taken from her body and was then taken to this church in Suffolk. It would have had to have been smuggled out of the Tower of London, and Henry VIII would not have allowed this if he would have known. He made the specific attempts to whitewash Anne from history, and there could have been some truth to this, as in the 19th century a remarkable discovery was found inside of the church. During the 19th century, the church was having work completed on it, and then a heart-shaped lead casket was discovered in the church below the organ, and inside of this casket dust was found. Some believed that this was carrying the decaying matter of Anne Boleyn's heart. The authenticity of this has been doubted, especially as Henry VIII went to huge efforts to make sure that Anne Boleyn's image was scrubbed from history, and that her reputation was ruined. But some locals still believe that the small lead box contained the heart of Anne Boleyn. However, during the Victorian times, the body of Anne Boleyn was found unearthed inside of the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula. The royal physician confirmed these remains were Anne's and that she had lost her head through a beheading. However, the heart of Anne Boleyn obviously could not have been found, as this would have disintegrated. The stories of Anne Boleyn and her heart are rather interesting and captivating, and whether her heart was taken out of her body following her execution is captivating. It was tradition at the time for this to happen, and there would have been possibly scope to have done this and removed her heart and also embalm her. She was obviously buried in a rough grave, but the Queen's heart would have been taken out when everyone would have disappeared following her execution. But if Henry VIII would have heard about this, he would have been furious. Thank you for watching, and to support, please subscribe to Her Remarkable History.